Greetings, dear viewers. Anthony Mars Jr. on Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film with a brand new edition of the Terra Adventure podcast with episode 327, presented by my Morphin Megaverse Power Rangers Facebook group. Haven't joined? Check it out now. Here's a little thing I like to talk about, because this is something that I've been wanting to talk about ever since, my Don't Go Back to High School discussion many years ago, back in my original run of the video series. So, what really occurred to me that aside from Power Rangers, what is one of my other aspirations as a person living on this earth? That's right, pop culture, entertainment, and also film and television and celebrities. But yeah, I know that's a lot to talk about. But here's the thing. I was just thinking about this even during this pandemic and thinking back to during my downtime not making videos. I was going through a bunch of posts on this website Quora.com. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name of that site. Quora.com, where people post questions and answers about why this and why that, and will this or should something, whatever. And every time I come on that site, I do have an account with Quora.com, and I have answered some people's questions about that. People, random questioners would put out about celebrities, celebrities like Samuel L. Jackson or Robert Downey Jr. or Keanu Reeves or, Matthew, Michael J. Fox or Angelina Jolie or any other celebrity. But those are just lists of celebrities that are older now. And what really come to my surprise every time I come on that site, and I also do get email notifications about Quora from a particular person giving you an answer or so. Every time I think about the whole particularly someone who was answering a question that someone requested about what happened to this celebrity, especially a celebrity who faded out of obscurity into Hollywood after years of numerous, long string of movie flops or television shows that didn't make it. And whenever I hear the names of some of those celebrities, mostly female celebrities, now I'm not going to mention the following person's name that I keep following whenever he gets these responses from people giving him questions, or he's the first to respond. Why did this celebrity not, why did that celebrity disappear from Hollywood? And, what really pissed me off was when this answerer person, this guy, I'm not going to say his name, but he's one of the top tier, questionnaires and, members of Quora whenever he brings up celebrities that had faded out of obscurity. Especially actresses that failed to make it past a certain point in their lives, legendary actresses like Rebecca De Moray, for example, or any other, or Rachel McAdams, or or that lady from Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol. And whenever I did hear his responses, and when he does a assessment on why did this celebrity, mostly female, didn't make it in Hollywood, and why did that celebrity disappear, or where is that celebrity now? And every time his name pops up following someone's question about it, his assessment comes off as cold-hearted. Cold, and I guess maybe it's just hard truth, pretty much. And aside from his assessment, when he does bring up about why did this celebrity's career go down the toilet and why that celebrity disappear, it would always be the number of flops that actress was in or actor was in, or they failed to break it in the television, and those shows they were on for pilot season only got canceled after one season, or but the one thing that still pissed me off hearing from him when he brings up, the celebrity about how old they got, is the whole they have aged or they're too old. But what really pissed me off, though, is whenever I hear about, that's when he brings up his assessment about the actress's age being 40 plus, it really kind of ticks me off that, not only female celebrities age, but male celebrities he never brings up about, because how Hollywood, if you're an actress in Hollywood, you're only in your peak in your 20s and 30s. But when you're 40 plus and you're, if you became a mom in real life, it's like, oh, you're a mom now in real life. So that means you get to play, these mother, somebody's wife, and grandmother roles, right? And, that's something that has always bugged me. And this is why I have to bring this up in my discussion with ageism. But what does this all have to do with, what I'm talking about in this Power Rangers podcast? Well, it turns out that, over the last almost nearly 30 years, I've been watching Power Rangers and following and worshiping this franchise to death more than any other franchise in pop culture. One of the common things with Power Rangers is that this franchise mostly consisted of younger characters, that being teenagers or early 20-something adults. But when you're in your mid-20s and mid to late 20s and 30 plus, it's like, no, you can't be a Power Ranger at this age and stuff, because, ageism is still like a huge benefactor when you're in the workforce. Regardless what industry you work for, ageism, and as long as you are in that industry, you're going to go through this every passing birthday and every passing year that comes by. And, ageism has always pissed me off, because knowing I'm right now 28 going on 29 years of age. But when we had, when I was in my early 20s, well, again, knowing when I started YouTube so long ago, in 2012, I know it's a long time now. Well, this channel will be 9 years. When I started YouTube, I was very young. I was unknown. No one cared about my existence. No one cared about my videos and stuff. But now, as soon as I'm in my late 20s, pushing 30, you would think people would start to realize I exist. But I'm not always going to be significant. I'm not going to be, a very talked up YouTube channel. And also knowing my channel, it hasn't been all that significant, really. And after I've tried to do so much I could to put out some good quality content, but I guess maybe I've been trying a bit too hard on that. But now that the older I get, I feel like that, I don't think people want to keep same old, or no matter how much I'm going to keep on doing this. But though by the time when I get around, the age of the 30 and 40 somethings now, this decade going forward, people are going to look at me as a has-been one day, because I'm already becoming that has-been, because my channel had been, I've been very avoidant putting out a bunch of videos about, anything, especially even when it's about my main topic, that being Power Rangers. But the problem with, Power Rangers for years is that, it makes sense that, Power Rangers is a kid's show, but you also have adults that, that were those kids that watched the show from the beginning, and now we're adults, we got older, and we want to expect something better from what, for us fans that, grew up on the series, while you also got the new fans enjoying what they're embracing right now. But what really ticked me off is that, of course, that the characters have to be teenagers or early 20-somethings. But lately, a lot of these newer seasons of Power Rangers have been, while hearkening on to Mighty Morphin throwbacks, you got, a few Ranger teams like Megaforce and Ninja Steel that are high school students, but the high school students are played by actors in their mid-20s. But back in the days when we had Mighty Morphin, Zeo, and Turbo, and In Space didn't have high school all that often, because they were always on the Astro Mega ship and finding Zordon and going across the galaxy and all that, trying to find them. But when it was Mighty Morphin, Zeo, and Turbo, the show is about, teenagers in high school. And Zordon had to recruit these young teenagers in school to combat these forces of evil that are from space. Let alone being Rita Zed, the Machine Empire, and Divatox. Astronema, that was when the Rangers didn't need Zordon, but they had to find him and stuff, but we get to that point. But when it comes to the casting process of casting an actor to be this Power Ranger, because knowing that, it's a kid's show, and, they have to cast actors that are at least, less than 30 years old or less than 25 to be these characters. Because, well, with the exception of when we had Blake Foster on Power Rangers during Turbo playing Justin. I mean, that was a different story because Blake Foster, when Turbo was being produced nearly 25 years ago, he was only a child. He was only 12, 13, something like that ish years old, you know, just like the same as his character when he came on the show. But when we had the original group, and when they were also the Zeo Rangers in the first half of Turbo, those actors, well, with the exceptions of Austin St. John and Johnny on Bosch, when they came on Power Rangers respectively, Austin and Johnny were both 19 years old when they came on Power Rangers, making them the youngest of their respective cast members. While everybody like Jason David Frank and Amy Jo Johnson and them were like in their early 20s, and you know how that is. But, you know, when you cast actors that were in their prime, that's when, okay, they have more energy and stamina than as opposed to an actor who is older than they are, you know, a few years older, let's say, than they are. But even though you do have some of those older actors, you know, some of those actors that are 2, 3, 4 years older than them, to actually still have more stamina and energy as opposed to their younger castmates. You know, for example, because why you think when we had David Yost and Amy Jo Johnson, when they were cast as Billy and Kimberly, well, they were mostly cast for their gymnastic abilities, while half of the other cast members were only cast for their martial arts abilities. And I think that's what made Mighty Morphin Power Rangers such a hit. But then as time went on, and when we had the changing of the cast every few years, and then, you know, the cast rotating out all the time, but you still had some of the energy of some of the cast members still pulling off martial arts and stuff during Zeo and Turbo until those guys had been left. But then when we had TJ's cast for Turbo second half, in space, well, they didn't really, I don't think they did all that much martial arts, but, well, they kind of did, but they wasn't really, you know, they most of their combat was mostly based on, you know, being what they were, especially with TJ and then with Andros and in space. They were always, you know, they did do martial arts, but they were always doing combat of how, like, you know, space ranger soldiers and stuff for the time. But when it comes to, like, you know, but you know, it makes sense casting younger actors that just want to start out acting, because when Power Rangers started, yes, the show has to consist of, you know, a non-union set of actors that are not big, never had any prior experience in acting. Some have, but when really, though, relatively unknown actors that want to get into acting to play the characters, and also mostly cast them for their gymnastic and or martial arts backgrounds. Because when the show started, that's what that was slightly about, aside from the character stuff and what they were and what made those characters so iconic and what made the actors so iconic in the roles that they played. But as time progressed with Power Rangers, in some particular seasons, the ones with government official teams like Time Force, Lightspeed Rescue, SPD, RPM, Beast Morphers. Well, Beast Morphers, I've noticed that given that their team was just recent and, you know, Dino Fury, that the cast has to be about, like, in their 20s at best to play these roles. And I'm surprised that the actor that plays the current Red Ranger of Dino Fury, Zato, I'm forgetting his name, but he is like the oldest actor right now, the oldest Red Ranger actor in his 30s, playing with a cast of actors that are in their 20s. Because, again, well, it makes sense for his character to be the old, you know, with his actor being older, to play a Red Ranger who, by the way, is alien, because he's at the age where he seems older and supposed to look very alien-like for the role he's playing. But, you know, I don't know why is it that, you know, with the ageism, it's like, you know, I've noticed that a lot of the times with Power Rangers, with the younger people involved, you know, younger characters, you know, whether it be, you know, Rangers from Mighty Morphin, Zeo, early Turbo, and even mid-Turbo and Space, and then, well, actually all the Ranger casts have to be younger actors in their 20s, because the thing is, you know, when you do these shows, you know, what kid is going to relate to some 30-year-old playing a Power Ranger? Well, it's no surprise that, you know, when you think about all of the superheroes, essentially, that, you know, so superheroes in Marvel and DC or other genre or other superhero comic publications, you look at some of the superheroes that are older than what they should look like Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Iron Man, Captain America. You know, those superheroes, for example, and like, you know, and even depending on how old Spider-Man should be in whatever continuity you do him, like Peter Parker as a teenager, Peter Parker as a college-age student, or Peter Parker as an adult. But then, well, again, I digress with that. But when you look at a lot of those superheroes, well, you have to go by who they look like, and you know, because they do look mature for what they look like. The Power Rangers got to be younger people, because younger people under, let's say, 25 years old, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 and over, they don't have much stamina and energy to do what they were doing. Because, like, for me right now, I'm like in my late 20s. I don't have that much energy to make videos and stuff like I was doing before, because I guess maybe I exhausted, you know, if you think back to why I took a long hiatus from videos and stuff like this, it's because all that energy I had exhausted in my early to mid 20s is probably why I don't have that much energy and stamina to make stuff like this now. But I'm still young and still in my my 20s are going to be over at the time of this anyway, and next year I'll be 30s. But it's just, the thing is, I'm just not quite sure what is young or what is old anymore. Like, is like 30 still considered young? 40 still considered young? But in the Hollywood world, you know, again, when you think about when you cast actors in certain roles, it's like when you cast an actor that's around the ages of 18 to 24, if they're playing a younger character, then they get to play the teenager, the hot throb guy or girl. But if you're like, I guess you can still do that even in your mid to late 20s too. But by the time you start turning 30 and over, that's when, okay, well, if you've been going through certain transitions in life, because that's part of life, and it's like, you know, it's like when you turn 30, 31, 32, you know, whatever age, mainly by around age 35, you know, between your mid to late 30s, you're like settling down, getting married, having kids, and you're just becoming a first-time parent. But then as time goes on, after you progress through your 30s, it's like, you know, once you, like I said earlier, you know, especially if you're a woman in the business, or, you know, or any business really, if you've been in the business for 2 decades, that's kind of like how they treat you. Like, once you start hitting that certain age number, yeah, they start, you know, people start treating you differently, start treating you like shit. Because again, even for the younger guy, even if there are guys like this too, but yet it's like there's a free pass. And I know I'm going to go a bit red pill, blue pill here, but it may come off, with my statements will be coming off a bit schizophrenic. But like, even I know I'm not trying. I don't want to try to make my Power Rangers podcast be that, but this is just an example of how I feel about with the casting process, and why do the Rangers have to be younger than the supporting characters or the villains. But it's like, you know, in the Power Rangers universe, like, if you're an actor, if you're a new up and rising actor who is in his or her late 20s, early 30s, and 30 and over, you're usually either cast as, in Power Rangers, if you're around that age demographic, let me repeat it, in your mid to late 20s, early 30s, and 30 and over, you're usually cast as that Power Rangers family relative, like brother, sister, if the brother and sister is 2 years older than the Ranger or so, aunt, uncle, mom and dad, you know, that sort of thing. If you got an actor who is in his or hers early 20s or late teens, around 18 and 19 ish, yeah, you're always going to be cast as that character. And then you have some supporting characters, you know, like Captain Mitchell, because I can't even tell how old was Ron Rogge, who played Captain Mitchell in Lightspeed Rescue, was when he played Captain Mitchell. He looked like he was about, given the mustache, make him look like he was older than he actually was. I can't even tell how old he was when he still did that season. Or even the actor who played Commander Stanton, or the actor who played Captain Logan, or, John Toohey, who played Doggy Kruger and Daggeron in SPD and Mystic Force respectively. But those kind of examples. And even James Galen, who has done numerous parts in Power Rangers since the Disney era, given how old he is, like 40, 50 something, 60-ish, playing Colonel Truman, or that one of the first Wind Ninja Academy senseis from Samurai's Journey and Ninja Storm, or the voice of Zeltrax in Dino Thunder, and but even with Kelson Henderson, how old he is currently, and even back how old he was when he played characters like Boom and Phineas and Norg in them, so what have you, so that's the thing, because it's like you're always going to be cast as the supporting character. And even more importantly, a lot of the majority of the actors who have played Power Rangers is iconic long list of colorful cast, but villainous villains, for instance, although with the fact we already lost Lord Zedd's original Finster's voice actor, and the also responsible for numerous other monsters he had done, Robert Axelrod. Robert Axelrod passed away age 72 years ago. I know I will talk more about Axelrod in a future video, probably in September following Tui Trang's 20th anniversary since her passing kind of video. I'll probably do that on occasion and on time for her 20th death anniversary. But when it comes to a lot of those actors that have played villains or provided the voices of those monster villains in Power Rangers, you're always going to also play the villain, for instance, because you got older actors that are, okay, if they look too mature enough, they should play the villain. Like, for instance, when I look at the actresses that have played Divatox and Trakina, for example, well, I can tell that when I even looked at Hilary Shepard when she played Divatox in Power Rangers Turbo in its movie and in space for a few episodes, she looked like she was in her 30s, which she should be when she played that part. But given that the character, because given Power Rangers is fictional and it's make-believe, it's fantasized, that, the actors have to look, the characters have to be considered like, well, if these space alien villains like Rita, Divatox, and Trakina and them, and, the rest are supposed to be like 10,000 years old, 6,000 years old, then that means you got to cast an actor or actress to play those roles if they're in their 30s or 40s to play these roles if they look very mature looking. And even you can tell some of the age cracks on some of the faces of the actors and actresses that are, especially for the human villain actors like Rita, Divatox, Astronema, Trakina, Rancic, Viper in them, for example. And even, Daishi and, I guess to a degree, Blaze and Roxy. And you have to cast those actors that are in their 30s or 40s or so to play these villains, because if they look so mature and intimidating looking, and that's also how they also treat certain actors that wear facial hair and mustaches, like Rick Medina when he was cast as Decker in Samurai. Like, oh, if you got a beard, a mustache, and, you can't be a ranger. It's like, wow, that's kind of discriminatory. And I mean, but yet the actors who played the Spirit Rangers, like especially like especially like the Pai Shuao masters, like Master Rilla and his actor, he had a mustache, but he played a Pai Shuao master. It's like, oh, like there's also this discriminatory that, oh, like none of the Rangers that are younger than they should can't have beards and facial hair, especially for the male Rangers. I mean, for freak's sakes, I mean, when Jason David Frank came back as Tommy when Tommy came back in Dino Thunder, Jason David Frank had a small stubble goatee under his lip and such, and under the chin. So what's wrong that, well, even though it made sense because, Tommy, based on what was established in continuity, because when we last saw Tommy was outside of Turbo was Forever Red in Wild Force. and sporting a new hairstyle, ditching the long hair from the, that he had from the 90s, the ponytail and stuff. But you would think that, yeah, by Dino Thunder, Tommy should look older than he should. Jason David Frank was like in his early 30s already by the point of Dino Thunder, and so it made sense for Tommy to look older than he should for that season. Well, it made sense, but at least, JDF and Tommy gets a pass for this because, well, given he may be the greatest Power Ranger and the most fan favorite Ranger of all time, but Tommy gets a pass because he's been a Ranger multiple times over his time as a Power Ranger. But so it made sense for Dino Thunder. Well, although he may be the paleontologist teacher for Riverside High School for that whole year of 2004, which Dino Thunder took place following year wise. But even as a mentor and a teacher at a high school, he also had to pull off being a Power Ranger. And also, I know it makes sense that I have to keep going back to, thinking back to that one, thinking back to Back in Black from said season. Whenever I think of, so, the Power Rangers, I would say, can be anybody, regardless how old you are, how young you are. But it's like, it's true because no matter how old you are, you can still play a Ranger. But and also, like, there have been plenty of actors we had, like, mainly since, like, the Disney era, Power Rangers. If we have any actors that are older than they should, like 40, 50-ish, they play a legendary Power Ranger, like an older Power Ranger, a Power Ranger who was, like, who hasn't been in action in like 20, 30 years and comes back and try to bring some inspiration to the team and what they're messing up if they're a bunch of new ranking, new young and rising ranking soldiers in war against evil. And like, and the younger Rangers must discover that this Ranger must have been lost in time in a time warp or something. So it makes sense you got to cast an actor who is around like late 30s, 40s, 50s, something like that to play that kind of Ranger. So it makes sense because it's like you can't cast an actor to, a 30-something actor to be a Power Ranger because it's like, especially, well, I would say that, one of the things I wish that I would love to have, in a Power Ranger season one day is start doing more adult Ranger teams, ones that are not always early, even for some of the Ranger teams that were in the early 20s at the time, even given the writing quality of the characters and the stories. But I think that I wish that they should make the characters more adult. But I think maybe we should save that for when we have a more adult Power Ranger show or an adult Power Ranger movie. I'm not counting what I saw from, again, that Power/Ranger short film with that. Given that the actors that played Rocky and Kimberly in that short thing were in their 30s, 40s-ish, playing those adult versions of Rocky and Kimberly, but I'm not going to count that. But it's like when they look up your birth date and stuff, they're going to say that, oh, you're 30 years old. You look a bit too mature to play this kind of 20-something role, 25-year-old role. But I think that's what it is. I think the truth is it is what it is when it comes to this ageism and casting stuff. So it doesn't, I guess it makes sense for the, for Power Rangers to, be younger people in high school or early college at best to take on these forces of evil because not only that, it's a kid's show. But it's no excuse that we can't have any adult actors over 30 to be Power Rangers too. I wish that eventually, given what I'm currently doing in my potential Power Rangers fan film cinematic universe, well, especially for a potential Mighty Morphin fan-made project, I want to do a more aged-up adult, version of these existing Ranger teams. Because while the Prime universe may have Rangers ranging from teenagers to early 20-somethings, back to teenagers, back to early 20-somethings every now and then, I wish that Power Rangers would do more adult characters as the Rangers. I mean, it's like, do you want to always have to leave the characters to be teenagers but played by a bunch of 20-somethings that were just getting out of high school and onto life? Well, I mean, they have to because kids have to relate to these actors playing these teenagers, but then when these kids grow up and find out these actors were in their early 20s playing these characters, well, yeah, so but again, no kid is going to relate to some actor in their 30s or 40s or 50s playing a superhero. But hell, I mean, look at like Robert Downey Jr., for example, again, when I brought his name up earlier in this podcast. Robert Downey Jr., when he played Tony Stark, Iron Man in the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the first Iron Man from 2008, he was like, what, pushing four? He was already like late 30s, early 40s when he played Tony Stark. Because Tony Stark is supposed to be like, what, a guy, a billionaire, high-tech superhero in his late 30s, early 40s. I mean, it's supposed to make sense for Tony Stark in a way. And, you know, Robert Downey Jr., okay, Iron Man was in 2008. Robert Downey Jr. was like, what, 40 something when he did when the movie came out. So he was like 39 or so when he did the first movie, when the first movie was filmed in 2007. So I guess maybe it makes sense. But yet, look at Iron Man. Look at Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. I mean, everybody loves him. Kids, teens, adults. Everybody loves him as Iron Man. While people like Chris Hemsworth and Chris Evans, when they played Thor and Captain America, well, Chris, you know, Hemsworth and Evans respectively, they were in their late 20s, early 30s when they were cast as Thor and Captain America, but yet kids and everybody loved those guys as Captain America and Thor. And even Scarlett Johansson. Yeah, Scarlett Johansson may be pushing 40, but you know what? No matter how old she is, she can still be Black Widow for like for a future MCU film, even if they killed her off in Avengers Endgame. Spoiler alert for those who didn't see that. But even for like on the DC side of things recently, I mean, Ben Affleck, I mean, him being chosen as Zack Snyder's take on Batman for the DCEU and the Snyderverse. Ben Affleck is like in his 40s, pushing 50, and he can still pull off Batman. Because, again, he was cast in that particular version of Snyder's vision as, you know, Snyder's Batman is still inspired by Frank Miller's Batman, where Batman in The Dark Knight Returns is an older Batman around his 50s, and he's very broken and violent and aggressive and you know, and all that, and a major aging recluse of a man. So that it makes sense for Ben Affleck to play that kind of Batman because he was at that proper age, but Affleck wasn't even 50 yet playing a Dark Knight Returns proper inspired Batman at that particular age, given what Snyder made him want to do with that character. But yet, you have kids and teens and other, you know, people my age and older that like Affleck's Batman because it worked. So it wouldn't make sense casting actors like that to be Power Rangers. Well, and also, again, Power Rangers, well, I'll talk about this next discussion about how Hollywood actors will never be part of Power Rangers because union versus non-union, and how it's always about like not just, you know, a kid or a teenager. I mean, anyone of all ages can be a ranger. I mean, hell, I go on, like, social media because I know I'm going about to cut down from this habit of being on social media a lot, where I go on, you know, on, like, Instagram and Facebook or wherever that has Power Rangers, you know, cosplay. You got people my age or older, you know, I even have a Facebook friend who's like, what, 40, 50 some years old, and he still cosplays a Power Ranger. That's crazy. I mean, I don't see why the heck is this such a huge deal. Like older people can't be Rangers. I mean, hell, if you think back to some of the fan casting choices I have for my Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film stuff, some of the actor choices I got are like 30, 40, 50-year-olds being Rangers. And hey, some of them would still look all right as a Ranger unless they're legendary enough. but it seems like, if I were to go with younger actors to be the Rangers, I have to build them up from the ground up and develop them over time. But if it's an older character, they're already veterinary, and it's like there's not much you can substantiate with those older actors and their older characters, because the whole old versus young thing is always been around for eons. And it's also the same issue, like I said earlier, with Hollywood, and how what always pissed me off with ageism in Hollywood, especially, compromisingly with women in the industry. Like when the women, actress or musician otherwise, get to a certain age, and once they, because, women, and again, I don't want to turn this into a red pill, blue pill kind of discussion thing here, but what I'm trying to say is, how it's like, it's I know it's a cold truth, like how when men get to their 30s and 40s, they still get, work and still get certain roles. And even sometimes, though, when you are one of those guys who probably let themselves go after something wasn't going right in their careers, promisingly in their 20s, when you see them reemerge into the industry some years later, but see that they're out of shape and, had gone through other things in life, like divorce and alimony payments between the wife and, about child support and whatever, that actor comes back and he doesn't look as he used to. Like, for example, look at Brendan Fraser. Brendan Fraser was so at the top of his game back in the 90s and 2000s, but it seemed like after he did that third and final movie of his Mummy franchise, throughout the 2010s, we haven't seen him in so long, and it seemed like once he appeared as Robot Man in the Doom Patrol show, he's just out of shape. And even look at Charlie Sheen. I mean, but yet you have some actors that male actors in their 30s and 40s still looking good at their age today. But when it's like, when you're a woman in the business, it's like, this is one of the reasons why we need to change this, because I'm getting sick and tired of, like, every time when a woman hits 40, they get mom, somebody's wife, and grandma roles. And like, well, it's kind of true, because the whole how I keep hearing that statement back when I wasn't making these kind of videos no more, about the whole men age like wine and women age like milk sort of things. Bitch, please. I mean, there are some women that do age like fine wine, because unless they have been taking great care of themselves. It's just there were certain women, like even certain actresses in Hollywood, and even for the actresses that had that stopped acting, like Eva Mendes and Cameron Diaz, for example. Those are the ones that are going to age like milk now, because knowing the fact that their careers have fizzled out because numerous movie bombs they've done during the early 2010s and stuff. So it makes sense. But for the following actresses like Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Lopez and them, and Salma Hayek, they're very unstoppable with their performances, and even Natalie Portman. So. But that just comes in about with this, with Power Rangers in general, but outside of the Hollywood people. But for the Power Ranger people, again, it makes sense. Like the only times we bring back the actors that have been on Power Rangers, like JDF and them, and anybody from like any season that we know. It's like, for instance, when I looked at Dimensions in Danger, I'm surprised how long it's been since we've seen Rocky and Kat on screen since Turbo. And, and see how they've aged a little bit, but they can still pull off the spandex and kick ass in the spandex. And even some of the actors that we have from the Disney era, after we haven't seen them and seen some of their characters in so long, they can still kick some butt in the spandex too. But we still have to focus on like the newer people now, because a lot of the actors that have been around since the franchise started, they're getting older. And I'm surprised that a lot of the actors from my generation of Power Rangers are already turning 50. The ones that started their careers back in the 90s when the franchise began, and now that Power Rangers is reaching its 30 plus years of pop culture's existence and zeitgeist, the actors that have been around since Mighty Morphin and stuff are now pushing 50. That's kind of crazy, while the actors from the Disney seasons are like pushing 40, and Neo Saban's actors are now pushing 30. So yeah, time flies, and I'm, as a longtime fan myself, I'm turning 30 next year, and I don't know how long I'm going to keep on going with this kind of thing on YouTube. So that's about it, guys. I think I've said enough for 40 minutes, and tell me what you guys feel about this ageism in Power Rangers. You know, do you feel like we should do more adult Rangers, or just stick to more younger characters to, to have kids look up to for role models? Because I feel like having adult actors wouldn't really do, adult actors in their 30s and stuff wouldn't, relate for kids to relate to, because it would feel, I don't know, wrong or so. But let me know, guys. Anyway, that's it. Be sure to subscribe, drop a like, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys next time with a new installment of this podcast and more videos to come on the channel. Thanks for watching.